Next up is number 754, My Life Had Stood, a Loaded Gun. This poem is difficult. Okay, this of all the ones that are out there that Dickinson has wrote, this is one that really is a challenge to try to work your way through. But if you're able to do it, man, there is a lot going on here. This idea, my life had stood a loaded gun in corners till a day the owner passed, identified, and carried me away. So you immediately are forced onto multiple planes of understanding. Okay, like the idea that you are a loaded gun, okay, and that you were just there waiting, okay, until one day your owner, the gun owner, comes and takes the gun and carries you away, okay. Then there's also the idea that you aren't just a loaded gun, that your life itself is the idea of this thing like a loaded gun, that it has all this potential, that it's full of all this possibility. But then the owner, here's the big thing, is that the owner could be God, right? That's a possibility, and that you've just been waiting there, and then God comes and takes you and allows you to sort of fulfill your duty. Also, there's the possibility of the idea of the owner as a love interest, right? Some people like that interpretation. I think it's a little bit dull, but there's definitely something to it, that basically, you are waiting there for the beloved, and once the beloved shows up, then and only then are you going to be sort of free and liberated to live your life. So as you go through the poem, that's those three different ways of looking at it are always going to be in there, and you can sort of interpret each and every line and each and every stanza based off of those three different interpretations. So you can see how in a hurry this poem becomes incredibly complicated. But one of the big sort of themes that runs through it is this idea of, that you can achieve power through submission to the control of the owner, right? Regardless of what that is, that if you submit to this greater power, regardless of whether it be God or, a beloved, or just the idea of a gun owner, that in all of these things, once that is present, that is what allows for the enablement of and fulfillment of a greater purpose. So as it says, and now we roam in sovereign woods, and now we hunt the doe, and every time I speak for him, every time the gun is fired, every time you as a human being talk or do something, the mountain straight reply, the echo, right? And do I smile such cordial light? The idea of you smiling as an individual, or the idea of gunfire, all of these things are there. And as the poem goes on, the complexity just piles on complexity, piles on complexity. This is definitely a complicated work. And at the end, the last stanza just blows the roof off in terms of complication. Because here at the end, though I than he may longer live, he longer must than I, for I have but the power to kill without the power to die. So that, you can think about it in terms of a gun and a human being. Okay, so the gun might live longer than the person who owns the gun, but he, in a sense, lives longer than the gun because he could potentially have an eternal soul, but whereas the gun has the power to kill but not the power to die, right? So, man, complicated. If you start thinking about that in terms of the God interpretation, oh man, that's a really complicated thing, because though I than he may longer live, the idea that an individual person can live longer than God. That's complicated stuff. He longer must than I. Okay, that's sort of something more in accordance with what we would believe. But then there's the idea the individual is not capable of dying, whereas a God would be capable of dying. Whew, man, big ideas. Big ideas. This poem right here, this is the reason why people devote their entire lives to studying Emily Dickinson. This is the reason why Emily Dickinson, a woman who mostly avoided fame in her own life, is now universally viewed as an unparalleled genius. It's just that she's able to pack that many ideas into this little tiny poem.